Here's something that'll blow your mind. Anxiety isn't an emotion. Yeah, you heard me right. Anxiety is actually a consequence of how you're thinking. And most people are walking around making 5 massive thinking errors that guarantee they'll feel anxious and they don't even know they're doing it. I spent 4 decades proving this in therapy sessions, and the results were so consistent it was almost boring. Change these 5 thinking patterns and your anxiety drops like a rock. Keep making these errors, and you'll stay anxious no matter what pills you take or breathing exercises you do. Look, here's the deal with anxiety. Most people think it's something that happens to them, like the weather, like catching a cold. But that's completely wrong. Anxiety is something you're doing to yourself through specific, identifiable thinking errors. And here's why this matters. If anxiety just happens to you, you're helpless. You're a victim. You've got to wait for circumstances to change, or take pills to numb yourself, or do breathing exercises every time you freak out. But if anxiety is something you're creating through thinking errors, which it is, then you can stop creating it. You can catch yourself making these errors and correct them in real time. Over the next 26 minutes, I'm going to show you the 5 thinking errors that create about 90% of all anxiety. Not theory, not mumbo-jumbo. Specific patterns I've identified in thousands of therapy sessions over 40 years. Most anxiety advice tells you to manage your symptoms. Deep breaths, meditation, mindfulness. That's like mopping the floor while the sink's still overflowing. I'm going to show you how to turn off the damn faucet. By the end of this video, you'll be able to spot these errors when they're happening, understand exactly how they're creating your anxiety, and have practical tools to dispute them and shut them down. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations or pretending everything's fine. This is about thinking accurately instead of thinking in ways that scare the hell out of you unnecessarily. All right, let's jump into the first thinking error. I call it awfulizing, and you probably do this 20 times a day without realizing it. Here's how it works. Something bad happens or might happen, and your brain immediately jumps to this is awful. This is terrible. This is horrible. Notice the language there? Awful, terrible, horrible. These aren't just descriptions. They're exaggerations. They're your brain taking something that's bad or inconvenient and catastrophizing it into something supposedly unbearable. Let me give you an example. You make a mistake at work. A real mistake. You screw something up. Now, that's bad. It's genuinely not good. But your brain doesn't stop there, does it? Your brain goes, this is awful. This is a disaster. This is the worst thing that could happen. Really? Is it awful? Or is it just bad? Is it a disaster? Or is it just a mistake that has consequences? Is it the worst thing that could happen? Or can you actually think of about 500 worse things if you try? Here's the key insight. There's a huge difference between something being bad and something being awful. Bad means it's undesirable, inconvenient, frustrating. Awful means it's unbearable, that you literally cannot stand it, that it's the end of the world. And here's the thing. Almost nothing in your daily life is actually awful. Most stuff is just bad or annoying or disappointing. But when you use awful language to describe it, you create anxiety because your nervous system responds to that language. When you tell yourself something is awful and terrible and horrible, your body prepares for actual catastrophe. Your emotions don't respond to reality directly. They respond to your interpretation of reality. When you describe something as awful, you feel awful. When you describe it as bad but manageable, you feel concerned but capable. I had a client once who used to get stuck in traffic and call it awful. She'd sit there in her car, telling herself, this is awful. This is terrible. I can't stand this. And she'd arrive at work completely stressed out and anxious. Meanwhile, I'd remind her, you know, there are soldiers in war zones dealing with actual catastrophes right now. You're sitting in a comfortable car with air conditioning, listening to music. This is inconvenient. It's annoying, but it's not awful. Start catching yourself when you use catastrophic language. Ask yourself, is this actually awful, or is it just bad? Can I actually not stand this, or is it just really unpleasant? You'll find that you can stand almost everything you encounter. Think about it this way. Healthy thinking says, I'd strongly prefer this didn't happen, but it did, and I can handle it. Awfulizing says this absolutely must not happen, and now that it has, it's unbearable. See the difference? Next time you catch yourself saying something is awful, stop and reframe. This is bad. I don't like it, but it's not awful. People have handled much worse. I can handle this. Watch what happens to your anxiety when you do this. It won't disappear completely, but it'll drop significantly because you're describing reality accurately instead of catastrophizing it. Now, awfulizing is usually tied to the second thinking error, and this one's even more common. In fact, you probably make this error without even realizing it because it's hiding in the word need. Here's the second thinking error: confusing your preferences with your needs. And this one is everywhere in anxious thinking. Listen to how people talk. I need this job. I need them to like me. I need this to work out. I need to know what's going to happen. Really? You need it? Like you need oxygen? Like you need water? Or do you just want it really, really badly? Here's the distinction, and it's crucial. A need is something you literally cannot survive without. Food, water, air, shelter. That's about it. Everything else is a preference, even a very strong preference. But when you tell yourself you need something, when you turn a preference into a demand, you create anxiety. Because now your well-being depends on getting that thing. Now, if you don't get it, it's not just disappointing, it's supposedly catastrophic. Let me show you how this creates anxiety in real time. Say you really want a relationship. Totally normal, right? Most people want companionship. But if you tell yourself, I need a relationship, what happens? Well, now you're anxious whenever you're single. You're desperate in dating situations because this is supposedly a need. You come across as needy, which ironically makes you less attractive. You might stay in bad relationships because you need to be with someone. You're constantly anxious about whether this need is being met. Compare that to, I strongly prefer to be in a relationship. I really like that, but I don't need it. I can be okay without it, even if I'd rather not be. See what that does? It takes the desperation out. It allows you to be disappointed if you don't have a relationship, but not devastated. It lets you make better decisions because you're not operating from need-based panic. My whole approach boils down to this. People disturb themselves by turning preferences into demands. You want something, that's the preference. You demand it, that's the need statement. You don't get it, that's reality. You make yourself anxious or depressed, that's the consequence. There are 3 common need statements I hear all the time. I need people to approve of me. That creates social anxiety. I need certainty about the future. That creates generalized anxiety. I need things to be fair. That creates anger and anxiety. None of these are actually needs. They're preferences masquerading as requirements. When you recognize something as a preference, not a need, you free yourself. You can still want it strongly. You can still work hard to get it, but you're not psychologically dependent on it. Your okayness doesn't depend on it. I had a client who was convinced they needed a promotion to be happy. They created massive anxiety around it. Couldn't sleep. Constantly worried. Didn't get the promotion. And you know what happened? They were actually fine. They were disappointed for a few days. Then they moved on and found satisfaction in other areas of their life. All that anxiety was completely unnecessary. Catch yourself when you say I need. Replace it with I want or I prefer. Notice how this changes your anxiety level. I need them to like me creates panic. I prefer they like me, but I can't handle it if they don't create preference without desperation. This is one of the most powerful changes you can make in your thinking. Okay, so you're awfulizing and you're turning preferences into needs. But here's where it gets really interesting. The third thinking error actually determines how you see yourself, and it's probably the most damaging one of all. The third thinking error is what I call global rating, and it's one of the most toxic things humans do to themselves. Here's how it works. You take one aspect of your performance and use it to rate your entire worth as a person. You fail a test, and you conclude, I'm a failure. You make a social mistake, and you decide I'm awkward or I'm unlikable. You don't get a promotion, and you think I'm not good enough. Notice what's happening there? You're taking a behavior, something you did or didn't do, and you're using it to make a global judgment about your worth as a person. This is illogical as hell, and I'm going to show you why. You are a human being with thousands of traits, behaviors, and characteristics. You're good at some things, bad at others. You succeed sometimes, fail sometimes. You act kindly sometimes, like a jerk other times. You're a complex, ever-changing process with millions of variables. So when you say I'm a failure because you failed at one thing, you're taking one data point out of millions and using it to define your entire existence. That's like looking at one pixel on your screen and declaring the whole image worthless. But here's why this creates anxiety. If your worth as a person depends on your performance, then every performance becomes a referendum on whether you're okay as a human being. Every test, every social interaction, every work project, they all become threats to your fundamental okayness. That's exhausting. That's anxiety-provoking. And it's completely unnecessary. Here's the truth. You can't actually be rated as a person. You're too complex. You can rate your behaviors. That was a good presentation, or I handled that conversation poorly. But you can't rate you. This is one of my core concepts. Unconditional self-acceptance. Your worth as a person is not conditional on your achievements, others' approval, or your performance. You have worth simply because you exist. You can judge your behaviors without judging your essence. Think about the infinite complexity argument. You perform thousands of actions every day. Some are good, some are bad, most are neutral. How could you possibly add all those up and get a single rating? You can't. Any attempt to globally rate yourself is arbitrary and meaningless. And when you believe your worth depends on performance, you create a vicious cycle. You become anxious before performances because your worth is at stake. The anxiety hurts your performance. You perform poorly, which confirms your worthlessness. You become more anxious next time. It's a loop that global rating creates and maintains. Start separating behavior from identity. Instead of I'm stupid, try I made a stupid decision. Instead of I'm a failure, try I failed at this particular thing. Instead of I'm unlovable, try they didn't want to date me, which is about compatibility, not my worth. Let me give you a metaphor. If a restaurant serves one bad meal, is it a bad restaurant forever? Or did it just serve a bad meal? What if it serves thousands of good meals and one bad one? The restaurant worth can't be globally rated. Neither can a person's. You are not your behavior. You are a human being who sometimes behaves well and sometimes behaves poorly. That's it. Your worth doesn't go up and down based on your performance. It's constant. It's unconditional. Once you really get this, once you stop rating yourself globally, a huge chunk of your anxiety disappears. Because you're no longer putting your entire worth on the line every time you do something. Now, global rating is often connected to the fourth thinking error, and this one's about how you handle discomfort. It's called low frustration tolerance, and it's probably sabotaging you more than you realize. The fourth thinking error is low frustration tolerance, and it shows up in one phrase that anxious people say constantly. I can't stand it. I can't stand being uncomfortable. I can't stand not knowing what's going to happen. I can't stand the possibility of rejection. I can't stand feeling anxious. Here's the problem. You're lying to yourself. Yes, you can stand it. I know you can stand it because you're standing it. You're standing it right now. See, I can't stand it means you would die, disintegrate, or completely collapse if this thing continued. But you don't die. You don't disintegrate. You continue to exist, even when you're uncomfortable, uncertain, or anxious. The truth is, you can stand it. You just don't like standing it. And there's a massive difference. When you tell yourself, I can't stand this, you create anxiety because you've told yourself that whatever you're experiencing is unbearable. Your brain hears that message and goes into emergency mode. It starts looking for escape routes. It creates panic. But when you tell yourself the truth, I don't like this, but I can stand it, something different happens. You acknowledge the discomfort without catastrophizing it. You create space to tolerate the unpleasant experience without freaking out about it. Here's what this looks like in practice. Say you're anxious about a presentation. The old thinking is, I can't stand feeling this anxious. This is unbearable. I needed to stop immediately. What does that lead to? More anxiety about your anxiety. Avoidance behaviors. Maybe backing out of the presentation entirely. The anxiety wins because you've declared it unbearable. New thinking is, I don't like feeling anxious. It's really uncomfortable, but I can stand it. I felt anxious before and survived. I can do this presentation while feeling anxious, and the anxiety won't kill me. What does that lead to? You do the presentation. The anxiety is there, but you function anyway. You prove to yourself that you can stand what you thought you couldn't. The anxiety loses power. Much of anxiety is actually anxiety about discomfort. You feel uncomfortable, tell yourself you can't stand discomfort, and become anxious about the discomfort. It's a meta-anxiety that multiplies your suffering. Look at your history. Make a list of things you thought you couldn't stand. Breakups, failures, embarrassments, losses. Guess what? You stood all of them. You're still here. The evidence proves you can stand things you thought you couldn't. And here's the cool part. The more you practice standing discomfort, the better you get at it. It's like a muscle. Every time you acknowledge, I don't like this, but I can stand it, and then prove it by standing it, you increase your frustration tolerance for next time. You can prefer comfort while still being able to tolerate discomfort. You don't have to like uncertainty to be able to function with it. You don't have to enjoy anxiety to survive it. Preference is about what you want. Tolerance is about what you can handle. They're different things. I had a client with severe health anxiety who couldn't stand the uncertainty of medical symptoms. Every little ache or pain would send them into a panic spiral. The uncertainty created more anxiety than the actual symptoms. Once they learned to tolerate uncertainty with I don't like not knowing, but I can stand it, their anxiety dropped dramatically. They still preferred to know what was going on, but they could function without knowing. All right, we've covered 4 thinking errors so far, and they're all creating anxiety in different ways. But the 5th one, this is the sneaky one. This is the one that runs in the background constantly, and most people don't even know they're doing it. The 5th thinking error is fortune-telling, predicting negative outcomes as if you know the future. And if you have anxiety, you're probably doing this all day long. I'm going to fail this test. They're going to reject me. This is going to go badly. I'm going to embarrass myself. Something terrible is going to happen. Notice what's happening? You're treating your predictions like facts. You're fortune-telling, and your fortune is always negative. Here's the reality. You don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. The future hasn't occurred yet. It's literally unknowable. But your anxious brain doesn't care about that. It creates negative predictions and then treats them as certainties. And then, here's the kicker, you make yourself anxious about things that haven't happened and probably won't happen. Think about that for a second. You're suffering now about imaginary events in an imaginary future. You're creating real anxiety about fictional scenarios. I've had clients who spent months anxious about presentations that went fine, relationships that worked out, health scares that turned out to be nothing, job interviews they aced. They suffered in advance for disasters that never materialized. What a waste of your life. Here's what you need to understand. Fortune-telling isn't harmless. It creates 3 major problems. First, it creates anxiety about things that may never happen. Second, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you predict you'll fail and get anxious about it, the anxiety can actually hurt your performance. Third, it prevents you from being present because you're always living in an imaginary negative future. So what do you do instead? You replace fortune-telling with probability-based thinking. Instead of I'm going to fail, try I might fail or I might succeed. I don't know yet, but even if I do fail, it's not awful. It's just undesirable, and I can handle it. See how that changes things. You're acknowledging uncertainty instead of creating false certainty about negative outcomes. You're preparing yourself to handle either outcome instead of catastrophizing about one particular outcome. Keep track of your negative predictions for 1 week. Write them down. Then check back. How many actually happened the way you predicted? Most people find that maybe 5 to 10% of their catastrophic predictions come true. Your crystal ball is broken. Your brain uses anxiety to make fortune-telling seem legitimate. It thinks, I feel anxious about this, so it must be dangerous, so my prediction must be accurate. But that's backward. You feel anxious because you made a negative prediction, not because the prediction is true. The antidote to fortune-telling is learning to tolerate uncertainty. You don't need to know what's going to happen. You can function perfectly well with I don't know, and I don't need to know right now. I'll deal with reality when it arrives. Instead of predicting outcomes like I'm going to fail, focus on process. I'm going to prepare as well as I can, show up, and do my best. Whatever happens after that is partially out of my control, and I'll handle it. I had a client with social anxiety who predicted catastrophic embarrassment at every social event. They avoided most of them, and when forced to attend, they usually had a fine or good time. The predicted catastrophes never happened. The only real loss was all the events avoided based on false predictions. They were living a smaller life because they believed their broken crystal ball. Okay, so there you have it. The 5 thinking errors that create most of your anxiety. But knowing about them isn't enough. You got to actually use this information, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that. All right, you now know the 5 thinking errors. But here's the thing. Just knowing about them won't change your anxiety. You got to actively dispute these thoughts when they show up. This is the core of rational emotive behavior therapy. When you notice anxiety, you track back to the thought that created it, identify which thinking error you're making, and dispute it with more rational thinking. Here's the process. Step 1, notice the anxiety. When you feel anxious, pause. Don't just react to it. Notice it. I'm feeling anxious right now. Step 2, identify the thought. Ask yourself, what was I just thinking? Usually there's a thought right before the anxiety. Find it. Step 3, spot the thinking error. Look at that thought and ask, which thinking error am I making? Am I awfulizing, making this worse than it is? Am I using need statements, turning a preference into a demand? Am I globally rating myself, judging my worth based on performance? Am I claiming I can't stand something I actually can stand? Am I fortune-telling, predicting negative outcomes as if they're certain? Usually you're making more than one error at the same time. Step 4, dispute it. This is where you argue back. You challenge the irrational thought with questions. Where's the evidence for this? Is this logical? Is this helping me or hurting me? What would be a more accurate way to think about this? Step 5, replace with rational alternative. Create a new thought that's more accurate and less anxiety-producing. Let me show you this in action. Say you're anxious about a job interview. Irrational thought, I need to get this job. If I don't, it will be awful, and it will prove I'm a failure. I know I'm going to mess it up anyway. Spot the errors. Need statement. Confusing preference with necessity. Awfulizing, making it worse than it is. Global rating, judging worth based on one outcome. Fortune-telling, predicting failure. Dispute. Do I really need this job, or do I just want it? If I don't get it, will it actually be awful, or just disappointing? Does one job interview determine my entire worth? Do I actually know I'll mess it up, or am I fortune-telling? Rational alternative. I really want this job, and I'll be disappointed if I don't get it. But I don't need it. I could be okay without it. Not getting it would be unfortunate, not awful. One job interview doesn't determine my worth as a person. I don't know how it will go. I might do well, I might not, but either way I'll survive and handle whatever happens. Notice what happens to your anxiety when you think the rational alternative. It doesn't disappear completely. You might still feel some concern or nervousness, which is appropriate, but the intense anxiety drops significantly. This isn't about positive thinking or lying to yourself. It's about thinking accurately. The rational thoughts aren't everything will be perfect. This might not go how I want, but I can handle it, and my worth doesn't depend on it. Think of this like debugging code. When your program, your behavior isn't working, you don't just stare at the output, the anxiety. You trace back to find the bug in the code, the thinking error, identify it, and fix it. Your thoughts are your mental code, and you can debug them. Okay, let's bring this home. You've just learned the 5 thinking errors that create most anxiety. 1. Awfulizing, making things worse than they actually are by using catastrophic language. 2. Need statements, confusing your strong preferences with absolute necessities. 3. Global rating, judging your entire worth as a person based on single behaviors or outcomes. 4. Low frustration tolerance, telling yourself you can't stand things that you actually can stand. 5. Fortune-telling, predicting negative outcomes as if you have a crystal ball when you actually don't know what's going to happen. Here's what I want you to remember. Anxiety isn't something that happens to you. It's something you're creating through these thinking patterns. And that's actually great news because it means you have power here. You're not helpless. You're not broken. You're just running bad mental software, and you can update it. Will this be easy? No. These thinking errors are habits, and habits take time to change. You'll catch yourself making these errors constantly at first. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. Every time you spot one of these errors and dispute it, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching yourself a new way to think. And over time, the rational thinking becomes more automatic, and the anxiety becomes less frequent and less intense. So here's your challenge. For the next week, keep a thought log. When you feel anxious, write down what you were thinking, identify which thinking error you made, and write a rational alternative. Do this every single time you notice anxiety. It's going to feel awkward at first. You might feel stupid arguing with your own thoughts. Do it anyway, because this simple practice, catching and disputing irrational thoughts, is the most powerful tool for changing anxiety that exists. You've spent years training yourself to think irrationally. Now it's time to train yourself to think rationally. You can do this. You absolutely can. And listen, if you found this helpful, there's something else you need to know about. A lot of people get caught in what I call approval addiction. They make themselves anxious trying to get everyone to like them, which is impossible and unnecessary. I made another video where I break down exactly why you don't need approval to be okay, how approval seeking creates anxiety and kills your authenticity, and what to do instead. It's one of the most liberating concepts you can learn. The video is called Why You Don't Need Anyone's Approval and What Happens When You Finally Accept That. You'll see it pop up on screen right now or in the description below. Click on that video and watch it next, because approval anxiety is probably creating more problems in your life than you realize, and I'm going to show you how to break free from it completely. Go watch it now. I'll see you there.